In the Bible, hope is fleshed out differently than how the world uses the word hope. Hope's not a wish. Like, I hope my team wins, I hope my investments do well, I hope it doesn't rain. Instead, biblical hope is the confidence. Biblical hope is the assurance that God will do what He promises to do. Biblical hope is not the power of positive thinking. Biblical hope is in the grounded foreknowledge that God's words come true based on His proven character that's revealed in His written word. Somebody said it this way: hope is rooted in the past, and yet hope is focused on the future in eternity. When you examine that statement, that means we hope because the past history gives us 100% accuracy in verifying God's promises that they will come true. And it's focused on the future because it's focused on eternity, because we hope in the future that God describes and that God promises. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for hope means to wait with certain expectation. In the New Testament, the Greek word for hope is elpis, which means with absolute certainty based on God's ability. Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 1, says it this way: faith is the confidence in what we hope and the assurance about what we do not see. In the same book, in Hebrews chapter 6, a couple of chapters earlier, the author says it this way: we have this hope, and the hope is our anchor for our soul, which is firm and secure. I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to put myself out there. Truth is, without hope, our human survival, it's iffy. It's not hope in something. It's not just hope and willy-nilly, just putting it in something, because that's unsure. And according to the definition of hope, it's not even possible. That's not hope. It is hope in that which is solely trustworthy. Last week, we all worded it well when in our closing we sang the song, Solid Rock. We used the words of Edward Mote. Edward Mote said it this way: my hope is built on nothing less, nothing else than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Anything else we attempt to put our hope in, well, it turns out to be nothing more than a wish. I believe that hope is what we need to function properly. We need hope to make it to the proverbial finish line of our lives. Now, what I want to do is I want to do something a little bit unorthodox, because I want to contrast hope, which is what we need, with something that many times we want. And it's something called vengeance. If hope is what we need, vengeance many times is what we want. What is vengeance? Well, vengeance is the action of taking matters into our own hands for the purpose of getting even. Or in another way of saying it, it's the purpose of getting back. Well, that's the world's definition of vengeance: get even. But again, the Bible advises us differently. In fact, in Romans chapter 12, verse 19, Paul writes it this way. He says, vengeance is mine. This is what these are God's words. God is saying this. God is speaking. And God is saying, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. So God is taking sole responsibility for this thing called vengeance, what we want. The Apostle Paul writes this to command believers not to seek personal revenge when they're wronged. So instead of paying evil with evil, or I should say repaying evil with evil, believers are encouraged to trust God that He will orchestrate justice in His perfect timing, in His perfect way. In other words, don't take matters into your own hands. But the ever-present temptation I mean, if we were really honest, the ever-present temptation is, God, I know you've said to us, leave vengeance to me. But behind the curtain, we think, you need my assistance, don't you? I mean, I know you want vengeance and you say it's your responsibility alone, but let me help you out with that one, God. You know what God does for us is God combines hope and vengeance. Yeah, I'm going to make an argument here that God provides, he combines hope and vengeance. Well, how does he do that? Well, I want you to think of it this way. God assures us that he will take responsibility for perfectly righting all wrongs. He's going to take responsibility, and he promises us, he assures us, that's the hope, that he's going to right the wrong. That's vengeance. So God, we're going to see this morning, combines those two things, hope and vengeance, perfectly. See, we cannot hope based upon our own finite, limited knowledge without God's input. If we reject God's input, all we have are wishes, which are uncertain. And without God's direction, what we will do is we will take vengeance on others as our responsibility. And by doing that, we will flesh out vengeance unjustly. See, when we take matters into our own hands, we are motivated by our own selfishness, and that's sin. And good results never come from our sin. This morning in Revelation chapter 18, verses 11 through 24, which is what we're going to observe this morning, God gives us hope as a believer, and he informs us of how he will perfectly administer vengeance. Let me review where we've been. Chapter 17 and 18 of the book of Revelation reveals two Babylons. The first Babylon was an ideology that chapter 17 exposed. It was the idea, this Babylon idea was born 4,000 years ago, and we get it from Genesis chapter 11, verse 4, where men got this crazy notion to build a great name for themselves, to build their name, their image, and their likeness. Babylon thinking is all about building our name, image, and likeness. And this ambition of building our own NIL has been used to destroy every civilization over the past 4,000 years. When we think we're too big for our britches, when we put our needs over God's needs, when we put our thoughts over God's thoughts, we're in trouble and we are on a slippery slope, and our destruction will soon happen. Now, the second Babylon, revealed in chapter 18, verses 1 through 10, is a physical city called Babylon. And that physical city of Babylon, well, it promotes the NIL thinking. So this city will be located on the Euphrates River in the future. It will be during the tribulation. And this is where the Antichrist will have his headquarters, and it will be the head propaganda distribution center for NIL thinking. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 10 announced, rest assured, Babylon will be destroyed, both the NIL thinking as well as the physical city. Now, last week we left you with an interesting thought. And the thought was, where people stand when it comes to good and evil is always revealed when evil is destroyed. In other words, let me say it this way: how you react when sin is destroyed measures who you are devoted to. Now, God's commentary continues. We're going to look, first of all, at chapter 18, verses 11 through the first part of verse 17, and I'll kind of stop you as we begin to read through verse 17. And this reveals the reason people will follow in the future Babylon ideology. So let's get going. In verse 11 it says, and the merchants, the businesses of the world in the future, the merchants, the businesses of the earth, they weep and they mourn over her. Anytime her, she is referred to, it's talking about Babylon. So when Babylon is destroyed, the earth will weep. The businesses of the world will weep because no one buys their cargoes anymore. The economy will be wrecked. Now in verses 12 through 14, all the goods we value that Babylon has provided will disappear in a very short time. Let me read verses 12 through 14. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen, purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble. Verse 13, and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil, fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. Verse 14, the fruit you long for has gone from you, and all things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away, and men will no longer find them. And then in verse 15, the merchants of these things who became rich from Babylon will stand at a distance because of the fear of Babylon and torment, weeping and mourning. People will feel a loss that will be worldwide when all these luxuries are taken from mankind very quickly. In verse 16, saying, woe, woe, the great city Babylon, Babylon, who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. Now the first part of this, verse 17, says, for in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste. That word, those phrases, laid waste, means all of a sudden, riches will come to nothing. Now, this is a view into the future as a result of following Babylon ideology. The city of Babylon and Babylon ideology will be gone in a heartbeat. Now, this little paragraph in verses 11 through the first part of 17 reveals that when what mankind has placed their hope in is stripped away, people will be devastated. They will weep. Now, I want you to look carefully about this worldly system and how the worldly system woos us to focus. This worldly system focuses us on gold and silver and jewelry and linen and silk and wood carvings, woodworkings, ivory, bronze, marble, rare spices, perfumes, wines, stocked freezers full of beef and other livestock, forms of transportation. And then I want you to notice here, it lumps human slavery in as another tasty spice that will be done away with. As if human slavery is on the same scale. Oh no, I'm going to lose my access to enslaving someone else for my pleasure. And they're mourning that on the same scale as they mourn, oh no, I no longer have cinnamon. I want to be very clear. I mean, this is talking about human slavery. This is talking about taking pleasure at someone else's expense. This is sexual human trafficking. And I don't know why we're surprised that human sexual trafficking is going to be prevalent in the future during the tribulation. Because it happens, don't be surprised, it happens every Saturday during the fall at every college football game in those cities all over the country. Behind the scenes, women are exploited as an add-on attraction to game day. Not to mention those rare occasions of Super Bowl and national championship games where human trafficking, we can't even gauge the number of crimes that are taking place. So don't miss this. As we observe verse 14, when it calls all of these things luxuries, and people are beside themselves because their luxuries that they have been feeding on are taken from them. And verse 17 captures the horror that these people feel for living under this materialism. Make no mistake, I mean, they're worshiping stuff. They're worshiping things. And they're looking at people as objects for pleasure. All these luxuries that we have been addicted to, what we put our trust in, all of a sudden, God says, they've come to nothing. In an hour, they're vanished. And I want you to see that principle here. There's been a great expectation at that point of Babylon living. The expectation of, I deserve these things, I will partake in these things, and then in an hour, the reality, God takes them away. And the reality sets in, and all their addictive pleasures are gone. And now the gap between expectation and reality is a bitter, mournful disappointment that the world feels. You take God out of the equation, this is what we've got, the worship of stuff. And I want you to hear Jesus' words, because you can hear them echo from his earthly ministry. Do you remember? In Luke chapter 12, verses 19 and 20, Jesus said these words. He says, you've lied to yourself. You have laid yourself up many goods, anticipating that you would have them for years to come, all so that you could eat and drink and be merry. Then Jesus said, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. Now who will own what you have prepared? You know, I want to be clear. I mean, this is talking about a lot of material goods that we go, well, I've got some of those things. This is not about owning nice things. This is about nice things owning you. Do you hear me? Babylon ideology is not about, it's not saying, oh gosh, you've got a house, gosh, you should burn it down. No, this is not about nice, oh, you've got a car, oh, I'm sorry, we need to destroy that. No, this is not about you having nice things. Babylon ideology is about nice things owning you, where you're worshiping them. See, in the scriptures, we need to use our stuff to worship God, but don't worship your stuff. Now, I want you to observe the second half of verse 17, and then as we continue into verses 18 and 19. So that second half of verse 17, so we'll put verse 17, 18, and 19 up there, and it says, and every shipmaster, and every passenger, and every sailor, and as many as make their living by the sea, stood at a distance. And verse 18, and it says, and they were crying out as they saw the smoke of Babylon burning, saying, what city is like the great city of Babylon? Verse 19, and they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning and saying, woe, woe, the great city Babylon, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth. For in an hour she has been laid waste. See, verse 18 and 19 is a reminder how quickly poverty comes to the greedy. People are weeping and mourning, not because Babylon, the system and the town, are burnt to the ground. They are weeping, and they're using this religious expression. This is a religious expression. When you're repenting, what you do is you take ashes. This is an Old Testament practice. You take ashes and dust, and you put it on yourself, and you weep, and you mourn because of what your sin does, and you're sad about that, and you demonstrate that sadness and that sorrow. It's a repentive action. But they're not repentant. They're expressing themselves religiously, not because of their sin. They are weeping because they no longer can feed their flesh with what they worship. It's ridiculous that mankind can be reduced to this. But we see remnants of it today where people mourn, oh, goodbye, cinnamon. Oh, I no longer have cinnamon. Goodbye jewelry. Goodbye abundant beef. Goodbye bodies to take advantage of. You know, I look at this and I'm like, man, cry me a river. Where did you think this kind of living would lead to? I mean, I have no compassion for people in the future who have been given countless opportunities to repent, who have participated in the persecution of Christians, who have participated in human trafficking, who take pleasure of people at those people's expense, and now are whining because they no longer have cinnamon. Boo-hoo. Now I want you to look at verse 20. God orchestrates vengeance, and God brings hope. Two things. One thing we long for, vengeance, and one thing we desperately need is hope, and God combines them. He orchestrates them together. Look at verse 20. God says, rejoice over this Babylon that's being destroyed, O heaven. And you saints, you believers and apostles and prophets, whatever office you hold, because God has pronounced judgment for you against Babylon. It's a command. Hey, believer, rejoice. Whatever your office you hold, whether you're an apostle, prophet, follower, pastor, disciple, you need to rejoice. Because God has brought about vengeance. Babylon, which represents evil, is no more. Why rejoice? Because the surety of hope brings that reaction. God has overcome the world, rejoice. And because God overcomes the world, we can hope. Now, I know you're asking, okay, yeah, that sounds good. But what evidence do you have that this thing called vengeance, that you've said, and I get it, that only God can take, will come to be? I mean, do we really have the assurance that God will accurately do vengeance correctly? I mean, I want somebody to pay for what they did. I want evil to be squashed. What guarantee do we have that God is going to do this thing called vengeance accurately? I mean, doesn't he need my assistance in this? Well, I think verse 21 is the assurance from God that he deals accurately and appropriately with evil. Let me show it to you. Let's look at verse 21. A strong angel shows up who wasn't previously in the picture. Then a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and he threw that millstone into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the city and the name, image, and likeness thinking, the great city, this Babylon, will be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. See, the assurance that God will deal with evil is found in verse 21. And we need that assurance because we are so afraid that someone who hurt us, someone who performed evil, is going to get away with it. I mean, I know God has a lot to oversee, and so it might slip through his fingers. He might miss this one. Is my hurt that I experience going to be overlooked? And in verse 21, God promises that this evil place, Babylon, and this evil ideology, Babylon, that has hurt people, will be sentenced to a millstone placed on it and thrown into the sea. Well, what's good about that? Well, sin can't remain active while wearing a millstone. The sin that you were victimized by, the sin that has victimized the world for centuries, cannot keep alive because it will be wearing a millstone underwater. Sin doesn't get away with sin. God sends the sin that hurt you and that has hurt mankind to the bottom of the sea. You been hurt? Don't answer me out loud, but have you been hurt? If you're sitting here, you've probably been hurt. There's somebody who's hurt you. And all of us have different varying grades of hurt. Some of you, I can't imagine the hurt that you've experienced. And the sin that you were victimized. God is saying, I'm going to deal with it. Let God send the sin where it belongs. And here's the hope we have. He will do it better than we can do it. And by relinquishing vengeance to God, saying, okay, I'm not going to try to get even. I'm going to leave that on you. You told me to leave it on you. Well, if we leave it on God's hands, we will remain whole and intact. Because here's the thing. If we seek vengeance ourselves, we will experience the pain that we're trying to inflict on others. If we take matters into our own hands, the pain will come back on our heads. And by trusting God, we can remain whole and intact. It's up to Him. I don't have to do that. You know, if that isn't enough, God develops this picture of vengeance even further. It's found in verse 22 and 23. In verse 22 and 23, he's talking about in Babylon. And he's giving us these two verses to convince us. He said, I want you to hear, in Babylon, after God sends sin to the bottom of the sea, he's saying this, and the sound of the harpist in the city, and the musicians in the city, and the flute players, and the trumpeters, you won't hear them any longer. And in the city, there won't be any craftsmen of any craft, and there won't be found any longer in the city. And the sound of a mill will not be heard any longer. And verse 23, he says, and the light of the lamp will not shine in Babylon any longer. You want assurance of it? He said, you can't hear it, you can't see it. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride of the nations, you won't hear them any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because of all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And the word there, sorcery, is the word we get in our English. It's pharmacia. It means that these people who have been addicted to the drug of name, image, and likeness, you won't see them again. You won't hear from them again because you don't hear what's on the bottom of the sea. It is so gracious of God to give us further insight into His vengeance. He's saying, hey, believer, God says all of those who were addicted to the philosophy of the world, who were committed to destroying you and giving you pain, because there is evil that wants to hurt you. That's their intent. So this evil that was committed to destroying you, this evil that was committed to giving you pain, when I place the millstone on them, you will not hear from them again. God's going, I give you my word. Now here's the application to the reader today. I mean, it's kind of one of those, oh, thanks for coming, Dan. But it's pretty simple. We're not there yet in the future. But make sure that you don't fall prey to following a world system of NIL, where you're worshiping all of this stuff. You don't own stuff, stuff owns you. Don't fall prey to that system, because in the future, you don't want to be a part of carrying a millstone. So the obvious application, if you don't know Christ, come to Christ, repent of the system that you've been following. And you go, wait, that seems like a scare tactic. You're saying, hey, repent so you don't carry a millstone. That sounds kind of scare tactic. Okay, it is. See, a good warning ought to drive good behavior. And that's why I think sometimes in Christianity we're too nice. God's not void of giving us warnings. A warning is an alarm. And that's why an alarm is called an alarm. It ought to be scary to say, you don't repent, you're going to carry a millstone someday and it's not going to turn out good. See, when an alarm goes off, hypothetical scenario, if an alarm went off and this started buzzing, well, it would alarm us. It would wake us up and it would show us, hey, something's bad. We got to get out of the building. Something's bad. But it causes us to do something good. It causes us to get out of the danger zone. And so when God gives a strong warning, when he says, don't worship the NIL system. Don't worship stuff over God. It's a warning when he says, it won't be good for you because you won't be able to breathe underwater. See, when God sounds an alarm, it's for our well-being. But today people cry, oh no, God is too kind. We can't warn people. No, warning is a good thing because it keeps people out of harm's way. Now, verse 24 answers the question, why does God avenge? See, I thought God was all about love and feel good and not making people angry, and it's just really, when we talk about God to the non-believing world, we got to make him look as good as we possibly can. And now you're saying, wait a minute, there's a reason that God avenges evil? See, God is love, but his wrath does not allow him to be permissive when it comes to evil. I want you to see verse 24. And in Babylon was found the blood of prophets. In Babylon was found the blood of saints. And all who have been slain. In Babylon, we found believers who were slain on the earth. Why does Jesus avenge wrong? Because Jesus takes his bride being persecuted personally. See, just like Jesus is to his bride, the groom is to his bride. And Jesus is the groom to the church as the husband is to the bride. And the reason that God says, I avenge, is because Jesus takes his bride being persecuted personally. Look at it this way. If someone broke into my house for the purpose of hurting my wife, I wouldn't at that time, I wouldn't measure the pros and cons of what is it going to look like if I stand up to this. I wouldn't consider, how can we avoid conflict here? I would and I should come unglued. Because my bride, who I am one with, see, I made an oath to her. I made an oath to look out for her well-being over my own. Jesus made that same kind of oath to his bride. The church, the body of believers, Jesus made the oath to never leave or forsake her. And Jesus is always good on his promises. And so if somebody broke into our house, it would be my job to rain hell down on an evil force attempting to hurt my wife. At that point in time, you don't respond, oh gosh, honey, I hear somebody in the living room. Here, let me hold your pillow. Best of luck. Go out and get them, honey. You're tough. No, that doesn't cut it. And verse 24 communicates Jesus' heart, because this evil place and this evil NIL belief system has hurt his bride, who he is one with. And Jesus says, I am going to come unglued when it comes to destroying evil. See the difference in this analogy, Dan fighting for Julie, I'm finite, and there is a possibility that I can be overpowered. But Jesus, see, when Jesus fights for his bride, when Jesus exercises vengeance, his victory is sure. And we can place our hope in the fact Jesus brings about perfect vengeance. See, what this communicates is Jesus is saying, hey, when evil hurts my bride, when evil hurts you, believer, Jesus says, you have attacked me. And evil, you are done. This past week, as I was studying this, I was just reading through some passages. I was trying to look through some Old Testament passages where there are several of them where God writes that he will redeem the righteous, that he will seek vengeance, and he will do it perfectly. And I didn't get what I was after because I stopped at Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 12. Which says, the Lord said to Jeremiah, Jeremiah has been getting a vision from God, and God says this to Jeremiah, you know, this vision that I'm giving you, I want you to understand something, you have seen well. For I am watching over my word to perform it. So what God is saying to Jeremiah, he's saying everything that I have written, you know what, I'm monitoring it. Nothing I have ever written escapes me. And therefore, everything that I have promised you in my word, I will make it come to be. I love this. He says, I am watching over my word to perform it. You know what he's saying? I remember my words, and I do what I say. I mean, you contrast that to world leaders who, you know, you flip on the news, whatever outlet you want to watch, and some politician or somebody's being interviewed for some crime or something they've written down, and so senator or congressman this, or you said this back in November of 2020, and he will lean forward. I do not recall that. I don't remember. So convenient not to remember what you say. Jesus remembers everything he says. And everything he says, he has nothing to be ashamed of. And everything he says, he's going to follow through on. That's hope. God says, my promises are worth placing your hope in. I make promises, and I don't forget them, and I will follow through on them. So when God says, bear with me here just one second. When God says in Romans 12:19, when God says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. You know, you think, God just told me, I watch over my word to perform it. I never say something that I'm not going to follow through on. So when God says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, well, then I can trust God to do what he does far better than how I could do it. Let God do what he promises to do. And let me tell something to my counseling friends here who are listening, who might be in the auditorium. That is the healthy restoration way of dealing with the hurt you have experienced. You're working with somebody, counselor, who has been hurt. Hey, all of us probably qualify for that appointment with that counselor because all of us have been hurt. You know what healthy restoration means? Let God do what only he can do. Let him deal with the evil. He promises it. Let him deal with it, because if you take it on your shoulders, if you try to deal with the hurt that you've experienced, what will happen is the very vengeance that you are seeking will come back on top of your head. You will experience the pain that you're trying to inflict. And what a freeing thing. Let God do what He promises to do. That is the healthy, restoring way of dealing with the hurt you've experienced. See, I want you to see something in this passage. God has given us every reason to know He will take care of injustice. We don't have to. That's not our job. And He gives us the hope that He's going to do that. Who is like our God? There is no one like our God. As we were meeting this past week, we always said, what song can we sing? And we agreed we want to sing this song together as a body because I think it combines hope and vengeance. And it's called Bless God. And I think sometimes, let me just put up a caveat here. I think sometimes we go, hey, that whole idea, what am I going to bless God with? God is infinite, I am finite. Well, by definition, Psalm 103 says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. When we say bless God, what we're saying is to bless the Lord is to give God the praise He deserves. That's what it means to bless God. It's not like we're bringing Him something that He doesn't have. It's not like we're bringing Him something that He needs from us. God is not needy. But when we say, I bless God, we're saying, I give you the praise that you deserve. And there's a line in this song, Bless God. Blessed are those who run to God, who place their hope and their confidence in Jesus. Isn't that the definition of hope? Is that we're placing our hope, our concrete hope, not a wish, we're placing our concrete hope in Jesus, and there's no reason not to place our hope in Jesus. But notice this next line. It says, He won't forsake us. In other words, He won't abandon us. Why do we hope in God? Because He won't turn us over to evil. That's the vengeance we long for. God's not turning us over to evil. He's going, I got you. I will not turn you over to evil. I will not forsake you. So I think this song combines hope and vengeance. Lord God, we do not exist well without hope. Not a wish, but the surety and the confidence that is anchored into your character that is revealed in your word. We cannot live without your hope. And yet what we think what we want is we want to get even. We want somebody to hurt as bad as they have caused us to hurt. And you have said, I am trustworthy. I am worth putting your hope in. Let me take care of vengeance. Because you said, I search my words, I know what I've said, and I do what I say. So I don't have to take vengeance on myself. You will not forsake me. You don't turn a blind eye to my pain. You will right the wrong. And I have hope in that. Based upon the truth of your word, based upon the knowledge that I have that you will take evil and you will put a millstone on it and you will throw it to where it can no longer swim. So this morning we want to sing to you. We want to give you the praise that you deserve. In the words of the psalmist, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Lord, you deserve all the praise I can mount because you are good on your promises. You protect and you seek vengeance on our behalf.